Thanks for joining us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome. Right. Well, it looks like we have a good number of people joining us today, so I'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to our webinar, where we're going to talk about using the Food and Agricultural Mapper and Explorer, which is otherwise known as FAME. So you'll hear us referring to FAME throughout today. We're going to talk about how to use FAME to support and reporting. My name is Annalise Strawn. I'm an agricultural marketing specialist with the Local and Regional Foods Division of the USDA Ag Marketing Service. I'm joined today by Libby Christensen, who is the statewide food and agricultural specialist with Colorado State University and was actively involved in the creation and development of FAME. Libby, next slide, please. So today we're going to cover how to best make use of this resource to learn more about the state of local food systems in a given area or community or region. So we're going to provide an overview of FAME and how it was created and who's it meant to serve. We're also going to demo the tool using two specific use cases, provide kind of a general overview of what the tool can do and how it may be relevant to folks like yourself who are looking to incorporate up-to-date local food systems data in local and regional food systems grants. So then we'll also talk about some next steps for the data, how it's going to be upkept, and we have a few questions for you to think about as well as we go through today. So we're wondering if, as we go through the tool, if there are any questions for the data that come up. So we welcome you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout today for any specific questions that you may have for us during the Q&A session that we'll have at the end, but also just general questions that you have about the data as well. So we'll dive a little bit into what FAME is. So FAME came out of the Local and Regional Food Systems Response to COVID project, and it really responded to the need for better data access amongst food systems stakeholders. And members of the project worked with a wide variety of project partners to aggregate data from primary and secondary sources. They looked at gaps in existing food systems data and then developed a data dashboard to increase the accessibility to available food systems data. So the team developed FAME, and we'll stick a link in the chat, which brings together data from dozens of publicly available data sets to make it easy for food systems practitioners to really search and visualize up-to-date information about US local and regional food systems. So FAME is built as a Tableau dashboard, and it's an open access resource with the goal of supporting data usage in program development and decision-making to improve access to the data. So the hope is that food system stakeholders can use FAME to help with things like program design, business planning, grant writing, advocacy, or just to learn more about the state of local and regional food systems in their area through different data visualizations. So another hope is that the preloaded data scenarios, which we'll show here in a minute through the demos, help reduce the burden of accessing and using data for local and regional food systems stakeholders. So all the raw data that underpins FAME is available in a data warehouse that's hosted on a GitHub site, and Libby's going to go into that a little bit more in a moment. And this allows for some more advanced analysis to occur as well, if that's what's desired. So hopefully FAME improves access to more comprehensive data on local and regional food systems, as well as being a tool to support planning and evaluation and grant applications that'll help stakeholders really respond to current challenges. in the food system. So I'll now pass it over to Libby to talk about the creation and the process of how FAME came to be, and then detail the path forward.
Thank you so much, Annalise, and really appreciate this opportunity to share this tool with you all today. And wanted to start with kind of the goals that this group identified with the data and metrics team. And it was really to support and promote data equity, collection and use. So thinking about how people are collecting that information and then how they use it. Improving access to food systems related data from an array of sources, and then increase the use of data in programming, planning, evaluation, and decision making. And during our first iteration of this project, we ended up doing a number of focus groups with local food organizations across the country. And we found out that they were using data in a lot of different ways, but many of them were really almost chasing the dollars. So they were, whatever their grantor was asking them to do, they would go and collect that information. And then at the end of that grant period, they would no longer collect that information because of limitations of capacity. One of the things that was found out during the COVID pandemic is that people really wanted an opportunity to use data to make informed decisions about pivoting or changing their efforts really rapidly to meet the needs of their communities. And so some folks that had not been doing work in food access shifted into that space, seeing the particular need in their community, or folks that were thinking about doing online sales were able now to get more into the local food system. And so the idea was, how do we start bringing together information and resources across the country into one location that would be easy to use for people on the ground to make informed decisions? And that we started making this tool, and we really wanted to think about who's the specific user of this tool. And one way that really helped us wrap our mind around the diversity and amazing array of organizations and individuals working in local food systems was really to target local food system grant programs, kind of at that federal level, because there was a fair amount of consistency and regularity with the mission of those programs and the type of questions that they were asking. Still realizing that within that, there's still a lot of range of the different types of programs and work people are doing on the ground. So this could not have been possible without a really amazing team of individuals. They came from 3 different land grant institutions. We had Colorado State University, the University of Kentucky, and the University of Maine represented on the team. But in many ways, what really helped and created a fundamental piece of this tool was our communities of practice. And so we had a number of nationwide networks that were on the ground doing work with organizations that were applying for local food system grants or were actively involved in grant applications that were continually reminding us of the reality that folks were facing on the ground when using data and the types of questions that they were asking. And then we also had a number of really awesome partners that helped us create this tool. So I really want to highlight Data Elevates helped us build the visualization tool. And also Farm Fair helped us think through some of the GitHub challenges and their experience working with a huge amount of information and data. So as Annalise mentioned, while we're really just going to focus on FAME, the visualization tool today, there's a whole plethora of resources and tools that feed into this resource that we're going to use today. So we have an open access data warehouse that's housed on a GitHub. And if you're not familiar with GitHub, it's much more accessible than sometimes I think folks think it is. It's essentially just a open source, accessible. You don't need to create an account, that you can go onto that site and essentially download spreadsheets of all of the information that populates the visualization tool. And so every kind of number or map that we are going to show you all today, you can go back and see all of the raw information that we collected in that GitHub site. And we're still really much working in that space, and I'll give a couple more plugs about that later on. We also really wanted to think about the issue of making sure that we captured how people were using data in the field. So there's voices from the field, and this is where we share stories of folks and how they're using data. Also, we had a webinar on this project that goes really more in depth about all of these different pieces, and we have a conversation and a story from from FINE, the farm to institution New England program and how they were using data. And so it gives you kind of a more context on how to actually use this tool. But we're still collecting those stories. And so if you have an example of how you end up using this tool or know somebody else that is using it, that would be a place that you could share that. And then we can keep gathering these informations. And then also want to really highlight that as was noted in the goals, that equity was a foundational piece of this project, and we created a data equity framework to really think about how do we embed equity in every step of putting together this tool. So with that, I just want to briefly highlight before we jump into the case examples is what we mean by data equity. So there's lots of different challenges when we talk about data. And I think one of the things that people sometimes use as a crutch is that data is objective. But when we understand the realities of institutional racism and availability and access of data, that's not actually the case. And so we were limited because we weren't necessarily going out and collecting this information. And a lot of times we were leaning into federal resources and databases and other secondary sources that we couldn't necessarily change the practices on which information is collected, but we could be intentional about thinking about how the tool was created and structured and discussed to embed equity in this issue. So I'm not going to read this, but there's a much more lengthy explanation of the issues of equity and how they were considered in our development of this tool. So as you all know, there's lots of different components in the food system, and we also were working with, in addition to the communities of practice that you saw earlier, as specific partners on building this tool and this team. We had a number of we had about 35 different networks, national networks that we engaged during this project with on issues of food access or food systems. And so we looked at their kind of missions and their type of project that they were working on and found that a lot of their work was falling into these 5 general categories around labor, local food sales, business development and infrastructure, community resources, nutrition security, and food access. And then there was a 6th dimension of policy, but we had a really hard time thinking about metrics that we could easily capture in secondary data across the United States at a county level that would give any kind of insight on the issue of policy. And so we're still kind of working through that. So we highlight these 5 categories, and that's kind of how we organized the collection of the data. And also in the graphics, you'll see there's kind of tabs for each of these different subject matters. So I also want to just really highlight briefly that this tool is still in progress. We're still developing it. We continue to work on it. And so right now, all of the information is available at the point level. So we'll have a specific address or a GPS for a location or county level or state level. And we're really trying to push more towards this county and point level data just because it's so much richer. But that is kind of the bare minimum requirement for the data that's included in the warehouse. I also want to stress that we were trying to use information that covered the entire nation. And so while lots of different states maintain their own directories of local food institutions and infrastructure, we were reliant on the USDA local food directory to populate our map. And so that has a lot of good things, but also a lot of challenges associated with it. And so in a lot of instances, so we have a map of all the food hubs and farmers markets and farm stands. If you don't see your business or an organization or institution in your community, please register at the local food directory, and then that is how we're going to continually to populate this information. But we need a nationwide source of information that we didn't have enough time or capacity to go to every single Department of Agriculture, State Department of Agriculture, or local food organization within a state to put that together. So we're using and relying on this national data set. We also are still accepting or excited to hear about other pieces of information that we might have missed. So if you have an example of another data source that would benefit, that you think would be beneficial to this tool, please share that with us. But as I said, it has to be available at the point or county level. It also, the owners of the information have to feel comfortable about sharing that on an open platform that's accessible to all. And that's kind of one of our pillars of importance on this tool. And also, the more specific you are about the actual source of the data, the easier it will be for us to include it in the tool. So one of the challenges that we had when we were putting this tool together and working with folks is they would reference, like, I remember one time in the ag census, there was this question that I think would be interesting, but I don't actually know where it is or what the metric is. And so then we as a team had to go through and like try and find what exactly they were talking about. And then there was this back and forth. So if you can be very explicit and share the specific URL of the source of the data, that would vastly increase the probability that it will be added to the tool. And so Colorado State University and the Food System Institute is committed to uploading and updating this data annually. So we can't do it on a we don't have somebody, this is not somebody's full-time job. And so we have a data scientist that is helping us. And so we are committed once a year to kind of uploading this information and updating it. And there is historic information. And so we're also adding different years as we kind of go forward. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thanks, Libby. And I'm going to stick the link in the chat again for FAME for those who may have just joined us. So now it's time to dig in. All right. So yeah, now that we have an overview of FAME and what it is and how it was created, it's time to show you how to use it, what it can do. So I put the link in the chat. Feel free to follow along as we demo and kind of go through the tool, but also know that you have the link and it is live. So Libby and I will each demo a use case. I'll kind of go through FAME as a whole, and Libby's going to dig in a little bit more into a specific case about how you can use this tool to support in applications. So we know that as a grant applicant, gathering pertinent data to showcase the need for your proposed project might be challenging. So like we've said before, the goal of FAME is to really help stakeholders in making your case and helping show how your proposed project may support or interact with various aspects of the food system. So on my screen, you can see that this is the home page. It's under where you'll find all of the resources that Libby was describing, and it is just embedded on this page right here. So you'll have a general overview of FAME, some tips on using the maps, and a quick guide to using FAME that provides some user guidance. So are you looking for a full set of indicators? Click on the indicator map, which we'll get into. We'll get into each of these in a moment. So the indicator map. The indicator map offers key data and indicators to identify all the local and regional food systems assets and gaps and support local food systems planning. The indicator map has all the aggregated data that's accessible through this map, and you can select a state. So I'm going to select North Carolina because we're going to be looking at North Carolina with me. And you click apply. And you'll see that North Carolina pops up. So if you would know, if you can select on your indicator, but there are so many indicators here. So unless you know the specific data that you want, this may not be a good starting point. But let's say that we wanted to know the number of farms in North Carolina. So we selected North Carolina. We can scroll down. So there's information on disability, information on employment level. If we scroll down to farming, we have farms, total number from the NASS survey of 2017. So in here, it populates the information, and you can show the county names if you'd like. You can see here that in Hyde County, there are 138 farms from the 2007 National Ag Statistics Survey. So, but that's a lot of indicators, and it might not be the best place to start. So we'd recommend starting at the Key Food Metrics tab. So we'll go there next. And the good thing is that once you click a state and you've decided to dig into that state a little bit more, it remains there throughout the tabs. So that makes it very helpful and hopefully user-friendly. So in the Key Food Metrics tab, you're going to find a little bit more of an overview. This doesn't show specific locations for information. It just provides the summary data. So it's going to talk about, you're going to be able to see things like the number of farms selling through local market channels, the percentage of farms selling through local market channels, direct sales per capita of local food, the number of farms selling intermediated, then some information on food deserts and retail food store density. So let's say you're applying for a Regional Food Systems Partnership Program grant to develop and strengthen the local and regional food system in eastern coastal North Carolina. You want to create additional markets for local food producers to tap into as part of the emergency food supply chain. So this is where you'll use your key metrics and you'll want to show specific counties. Here, if you unclick all, you're then able to select your specific counties that you want to focus on. So I'm just going to select a few. And let's do one more. Once you select those counties, you get the information only specifically for the counties selected. So you can then download any of this information that you'd want to download from this little download button here. So, but let's say, and like I said, this doesn't provide location for any of this information. It just provides the information itself. So let's say you then wanted to go know the number of farms. So you know that the indicator map shows the number of farms, but you hadn't had your specific counties yet. So let's say you want to now know the number of farms. You can go back to the indicator map. Now that you've selected those counties, and it remains on that indicator. So here you can see the specific number of farms in the counties that you're focused on for your application per se. And then you also wanted to learn some information on the infrastructure, let's say of storage or warehouse facilities in those same counties. So here, one of the topics is infrastructure. If you select on infrastructure, one of the options that is provided is storage facilities. You can also know some other things about the infrastructure capabilities in your area as well. No data is available there. So lastly, wanted to show a little bit about the local food markets map that Libby mentioned is populated through the local food directories. And here you can see for those counties for North Carolina, you can see that there is some information on farmers markets and a food hub, but like Libby said, there are gaps in this data, so please do use the local food marketing directories to make sure that your facility is listed. So that's just a brief overview of FAME itself. And I'll pass it over to Libby to talk about a possible use case in Colorado.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annalise. And just have gotten a few questions in the chat box and also in the Q&A. Wanted to share that once again, we were kind of reliant on the secondary data sources. And so we tried to include the most recent data. So a lot of the agricultural information is from the 2017 Ag Census. And so the intention is that when the new information is published, that we will then upload that into this tool. So I'll go once again and to share my screen. And when Annalise and I were preparing for this webinar, the question came up about like, well, how else could you use this tool? And so I live up in northwestern Colorado in the corner of the state close to Utah. And a couple weeks ago, I had a community member reach out to me and talk about a desire to repurpose and reutilize a lot of the greenhouses that are in our communities that are vacant because of the shrinkage in the cannabis industry. And could those buildings be repurposed or reused to grow food for our communities? And so in our conversations, he lives in Routt County, which is one of the counties in northwestern Colorado that's a group of an associated council. He was like, well, what should I do next? Like, how do I get started? I'm interested in applying for a local food system grant. Do you have any guidance for what I should do next? And I was like, actually, I have this really awesome tool that can help facilitate that conversation and to think through some of the possibilities of what we can do with that kind of resource. And so we were kind of circling around. I don't know if you all have had these conversations where we have a really passionate community member that wants to save the world, that wants to do X, Y, and Z and the rest of the alphabet. And so I was able to pull up this tool and use it as a conversation, a tool to facilitate and narrow in our conversation and maybe figure out what exactly the project could look like or how best to kind of direct it. And so I think that is a really great asset that we can think about here. So if we go into the FAME tool again, pull up that indicator map, and there are over 300 different variables in here. And so as Annalise said, it can be a little overwhelming. And it can also take a little time to load, especially if we've got a lot of folks in there. And as I said, I'm located in Colorado, and I got some questions from folks about they're trying to explore data in Florida, but can't necessarily get the counties. But I'm going to go into Colorado. And so some of our variables are only available at the state level, but the vast majority are at counties. And so if you do click the state, it should automatically get you to that state. And then you have the option of selecting all the counties or narrowing in. So northwestern Colorado is comprised of 8 different counties in our association, and helps us think about there's access to additional resources and funds if you identify in this area. So this area is really also characterized by a lot of mountains, if you could imagine. It's very rural. We have a very short growing season. In my home county, we have on average 59 frost-free days, which I always feel like folks are kind of blown away by. So the possibility of repurposing some of those greenhouses could be really advantageous for our place. I'm gonna grab these. Okay. So we got our area that we're kind of focused in. And so knowing that we're thinking about issues about food access and economic development and agricultural production, we can go in and look at the number of grocery stores in our area. So we can just pull up old grocery stores, and also just to be mindful, the colors in the map change based on the number of counties that you're looking at. So if you've got the entire United States, it's going to be, the colors are going to kind of, and also the colors and the size of the bars are going to be dictated by the full spread. So if you have a smaller area, you can see greater variation. So it's important or useful to kind of dig in and narrow your geography. So here we can see that the 2 counties that are the more populous have more grocery stores. And so if we were thinking about doing a greenhouse production system, thinking about where would be appropriate market targets, we would maybe think about Moffat County or Rio Blanco or Jackson County because they have fewer grocery stores. But we also, I think one of the things that is really powerful about this tool is in the past, we're oftentimes reliant on whoever's creating the data to decide how to visualize it and what's important in terms of telling the story. And so here, this is just the raw number of grocery stores, but if we go back to grocery stores and you can type it into this box, you can see the grocery stores per 1,000 people. And so this gives you a little bit more sense of the density of those grocery stores and how many grocery stores you have per person. Also important to keep in mind that some of these variables are like switched. So here, green is actually good. So there's 1.47 grocery stores per 1,000 people, versus Gilpin County doesn't have a grocery store. So there's no market serving that community. And it is also always important to think about here, we've got some information about the indicator. We have the year it was from. So 2016, we might assume that there has been some changes since that time, and the general definition of the information. We could also look at something like food insecurity rates for this area to think about how many folks in these communities are facing food insecurity. We've got this for adults and children. Oh, that different variable got picked up. So we can see that Moffat County has 12.9% of the population facing food insecurity in 2019. So if I was working with my community partner and thinking about utilize his kind of idea to utilize greenhouses, one of the things that we had in that conversation was really thinking about how could you make sure that if you're growing in Routt County, how do you make sure that that product is getting to Moffat County, and explaining the specific need in those areas. So that is just an example of how to use this tool. We hope that this can be of value to you all, and we're happy to answer some questions if you want to put them in the question and answer. But yeah.
So we wanted to leave quite a bit of time to get through any questions or comments or suggestions that you may have. So please put those in the chat or the Q&A box. And we did get a question about exploring Florida data. And so some indicators, like Libby said, are just missing county level data. But it looks like I refreshed my screen and took away North Carolina, and looks like that Florida is there. You can see quite a bit when you go into the key food metrics and the indicator. So hopefully that is helpful.
And then regarding the different browsers, I've used it on my phone, and I've also used it on Microsoft Edge and Chrome. And so I don't know if those all have seemed to work for me. We can try and do some problem solving with Firefox as well.
And so we got a question about trying to download the list of grocery stores by name and location, but was only able to download an image. So can Libby, you talk a little bit about how to download the indicator data?
Yeah, so I can actually here. So we shared the link a couple times to the website. So so this was the homepage, and it's got the 4 boxes. And then if you do click on Learn More for the Open Data Warehouse and go to the GitHub site, under that indicator map, there's each of the different boxes of where the kind of information is stored. And so food access is where the grocery store information is going to be. And so these are pretty massive comma-separated files, comma-separate variable files. And so you can just download the raw data in here, and it's not going to give you the name of the grocery stores. It's going to give you the number of grocery stores per county. But the tricky thing is that it includes every variable that's included in that category of food access. So you just need somebody that feels comfortable working with very large spreadsheets. And also in this file is the file that includes the list of the specific source of the data that you could go back and click on the source.
We have a next question that asks, does the data include information on the number of BIPOC farmers in particular states and counties? So does it get that granular in terms of demographic data?
That was one of the hard ones, and we're still working with the USDA on if we could get access to that data, because in so many counties, the number of BIPOC farmers are so small that there are disclosure agreements that they can't necessarily share that information, because you would know exactly which producer it might be. And so depending on how granular you dig down in the data, if you don't have more, I think it's more than 6 observations, they won't give you a number. So that's one of the challenges that we are facing. And we are trying to figure out if we could get some of the restricted access, particularly from the ARMS data, to share with folks. But it's an ongoing kind of negotiation about that issue about disclosure and wanting to make sure to protect the identity of producers.
Are you going to add a map similar to the local food market map that spotlights feeding programs and food access locations? So something that's specifically geared towards food access or emergency feeding.
That's a great idea. And I think one thing that we forgot to talk about and mention is that this summer, we're going to work with the Applied Agricultural Economic Association conference, and it's going to be held in DC. And so there's a group of graduate students that will be looking at this data and really trying to dig in. So if there's questions exactly like that about food access locations, we could populate that. Again, going to issues around food access, specifically around the national data. Feeding America was one of the partners on the project, and so we can identify some of their distribution sites, but also one of the challenges is, and I'm sure in your communities is similar to mine, some of our food access points are our local churches that aren't necessarily registered with a national entity, and so where we can find that information. So that would be a great example, like if you know of a database that has all food access points across the country beyond just like kind of large distribution facilities, then that would be something that would be great to add to this tool, and we would be super excited to add it.
And I think that question is an awesome one to take to the grad student hackathon, who are going to dig into this data and especially answer questions just like that. So thank you. And please continue putting those things, comments like that in the chat. And we've had a few questions about how to share information about local food outlets, farmers markets, etc. So I'm going to put the link to where you can upload that information, so to make sure that it's populated into the local food directories in the chat. And the more people do that, the better the data is that will be in FAME. So we appreciate it.
Digging into the Hampton County, Massachusetts question, I was going to go ahead and take a quick look at the map there, but I understand and respect the issue that we don't have enough numbers on BIPOC farmers, but if you go into the data equity, this was a lot of the dimensions that we wanted to explore were on dimensions of gender, race and ethnicity, and depending on the data set, that the amount of information and the number of observations in any one of those categories is so small that they can't subdivide the data to the point where it gets to that level of specificity. So like another one is wages is a really good example about role in the food system, and varying in terms of wages for different folks, knowing that Women oftentimes make so much less in food service positions, but the way that the American Census reports that information, that you can't necessarily break that out. And so if you have restricted access, so that's oftentimes what happens when journal articles are published, and so academic folks associated with universities can get restricted access and can analyze that data and then report kind of general trends. But again, they really don't like giving any specific information about a specific county because of the potential to have negative consequences for either specific businesses or specific producers. Like if you could back calculate the information, and they want to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And Libby, when the data creation or compilation was happening, were the state departments of ag involved at all, or is that something we should think about?
We reached out to them, and but again, each of them collect very different information, and the quality of that information varies so much from state to state. Some states have had a long committed past, like history of supporting local food systems, while other state departments, they don't have the capacity or the time or the interest about supporting local food systems. And so they don't necessarily have detailed information about farmers markets or beginning farmers or veteran farmers. So that's why we kind of went to this national source for a lot of the information, recognizing that there is so much more nuance and detail and richness in a lot of the state information. And I think if we can demonstrate a value in something like having this tool, then we can go back and have a conversation with state departments and say, would you all be willing to kind of adopt this one form or format to collect that information? And then we could have it at a national level. I know that's the kind of conversations that we're having at Farm to School. And what I think has been so powerful with the Farm to School census is that they saw a need for that specific thing, and they got the buy-in from their school districts across the country to share that information, and that they committed to having it kind of open access and clear. And so we can see a similar local catch, which is a fisheries organization, a national fisheries organization is seeing that need. And so they, as a national organization, are kind of working to collect nationwide data about fisheries and trying to fill that void.
So we're getting some questions. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was
about
just going
the age of the data. So that all the indicators are not necessarily from the same year. Some may be from 5 or 10 years ago at this point. So what was your thought process about including different ages of the data? And we did talk about how we're going to update this yearly based on new data that's coming out.
Yeah, so exactly that. We will keep each year, kind of go back to those same sources and see if there's newer information. I think it's also important to kind of note that, like in a lot of ways, this tool is really a starting place, and is to help you kind of hone in on what the particular need or opportunity is in your community. I think it is academically rigorous enough to say these are the sources of information. This is the best numbers that we have to apply for a local food system grant. But I think if you're working on in an academic setting, or if you're trying to show kind of general trends or impacts, it would be more appropriate to collect additional sources or dig a little bit more deeply into the information. And so the GitHub site is really allows for some of that more analysis and being able to download those numbers and look at kind of general trends. This is really about a starting place to that conversation. So that's why I think even if education levels, there might be, I think in every instance we did our best to collect to show the latest information. And so I think for having that conversation, you can say it would be expected to see changes in education levels as a result of kind of general trends, but this is at least a starting place. yeah, about there's a question about data manipulation and a challenge for lower capacity organizations. We totally hear you, and I think we are all committed to trying to continue to help support kind of that education and capacity building. I think also the USDA and kind of the regional food business development centers, when they come online, see a particular need for increasing capacity of organizations that have that limited resources, and thinking about how to better deploy. But even from our brief conversations from partners that have utilized this tool, like a great example is from Vine. They were trying to put together a regional food system partnership grant with, I think it was nonprofits in Connecticut and Massachusetts and maybe New Hampshire. Don't quote me. And some of the organizations had very limited resources, and some of them had a ton of experience seeking $1 million grants. And what they found with something like this tool was that it created a starting place where they could come together in a room together and have a conversation where they were using the same information and playing around with the tool. So it actually helped level set a little bit and at least a common conversation, and that they were all pulling from the same information. So I think that there's a possibility of using it in intentional community building if one recognizes that there might be varying skill levels and levels of comfort. And so even like here in Northwestern Colorado, when I was talking to my community member about the greenhouse, he is a wizard with greenhouse heating systems, but working with this tool was totally intimidating. But just sitting down and having that conversation and helping them see it, and essentially doing exactly what I did with you all, helped reduce at least some of the intimidation and fear associated with working with that kind of information.
Yeah, and I'll also say that this this recording of this webinar is going to be put onto the FAME website so that there is a visual video of us talking about it and how to use it, and also thinking through different other types of demo videos, as well as a means of technical assistance that would be more accessible and kind of readily available for stakeholders who are looking for kind of step-by-step walkthrough.
So I can try and address the questions about garnering good information on good information about local food systems, and then also just a recognition of the historical failure of the USDA. I'm not paid by the USDA, that's why I'm allowed to say that. Failure of the USDA to work with communities of color. It's not just communities of color. I think that there's a general trend across the United States about fear of government oversight and data and science in general. I don't think the problem is necessarily getting better in all of our communities, but kind of dismissing the USDA or national organizations in their ability to kind of work with communities because of their historic failures isn't going to help move us forward. And so we, in developing this tool, tried to work with organizations that had historical relationships across the nation, but even the largest nationwide organization aren't able to do a census of agriculture. I don't know, there was recently an article in the New York Times about the difficulty of capturing birth rates and death rates across countries. You need federal organizations to collect nationwide census. I don't know if there's like a better solution. They have the resource and capacity to do that data collection and cleaning it up, and also protecting the identities of the people that are sharing that information. And so I think we can acknowledge and recognize the failures in the past and a tendency to dismiss or undervalue or undercount people. But I can't see a better solution, at least at this time, about saying that we shouldn't necessarily use these numbers.
We have a question about GitHub, which is how can local data collection organizations who are maybe collecting data rigorously on their own, put data into GitHub? Is it a collaborative situation?
So right now we've got Allie Bauman is on our team as the kind of data scientist that we're working with, and she is kind of doing the quality control. And on the localfoodeconomics.com website, we've got recommendations for data. And so if you share that resource, Allie would be happy to kind of make sure that it's consistent. And one of the things is just making sure that the county name and the codes are the same, so that when it goes into the system that it can be utilized to measure across the counties, that can work out.
And it looks like Maine was the third partner in that fine grant. Thanks, James, for putting that in the chat.
So we've got a question about local food marketing practices survey. Annalise, do you have any update on when that's gonna?
I do not, but I can find out. We have another question that says, our organization has data on feeding programs in 7 counties in New York. I wouldn't be able to log for everyone, but can encourage folks to. Basically wondering if each state's ag extension offices may help aggregate this data, and what role ag extension may have in populating the resource.
Yeah, so my position is actually with Extension in Colorado. And at least my experience across 3 different states extension offices is that the capacity and level of comfort with data collection is pretty varied. The only metric that we've been able to get Extension to capture across the state is our rates for forage leasing lands. So it's really specific by the county or by the state. And I think that's a really great example of somebody having really quality data for 7 counties in one state. And that's where the challenge comes. And I hope that by showing the value of this kind of tool and our partners with networks that cover the entire country, there's a possibility of thinking intentionally or strategically about what that data might look like, or prioritization of the key points of question. And I think even we're seeing here in the Q&A and the chat boxes, there's a couple of key metrics that people want information on. And so if we could prioritize those, and so I'm seeing food access locations, BIPOC farmers, beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers. Those are 2 of the big ones, I think. Then we can start thinking about how do we funnel some resources and energies towards standardizing some data collection, and then who are the key partners that we need to engage, and would it be appropriate to work with Extension or Feeding America or another organization to think about collecting that information. And once you have enough of that energy, then you can really move forward on collecting that, and then we could have it included in this tool.
Mm-hmm. What about data that's being collected through the farm census?
Yeah, so it is a slow process, but one of the things that we found is that we were already pulling a lot of the farm census data for our own purposes within our state, and it doesn't take much more time to do one state versus all the states. And so that's one of the places that we're finding efficiencies, and one of the reasons why we at Colorado State University are willing to commit to doing this annually moving forward. And so the tricky thing is this timing about committing. I think our intention is kind of the fall of this year to upload the next round of information and data. So it's just mostly the timing piece of when that kind of happens. But the good thing about the census is that that's probably one of the first things that our team will do, because we'll have to use it for our other projects that we're working on. So we'll be more likely to upload that into them.
One of the issues with this is that so much of the data is just a snapshot. without having the resources for regular updates. Yes, the continuous update of this tool is a ongoing discussion and is a challenge, and takes a lot of resources to update this resource. So we want to make sure that at least we can update it on a yearly basis. When the new Census of Ag data is uploaded, will it replace 2017's data, or will 2017 remain and then the new data will be added to compare? I think it'll be added to so that it's able to be compared.
Yeah, the intention is that we'll keep adding information, and I think also there's the possibility of putting in that recommendation if you would like more historical data that we could include that as well. It's just that we really pushed on having this the newest, and then we'll add on it moving forward. But there might be some value specifically, maybe for some specific metrics to have historical data. And there are some indicators that do have multiple years of data already in it. The challenge was that we didn't have enough of those indicators that had multiple years, that we couldn't visualize trends over time. But I think one of the goals, particularly with something like the census, is if we did have more historical information that we could show some trends over time. Like, I think SNAP participation was one of those that we had multiple years. The tricky thing with SNAP, we have WIC participation rate from 2005 to 2019. One of the tricky things with that one is that it's at the state level, I believe. And so you can't see as much nuance in the fineness within a county.
I do want to say that the recording, we're getting some questions about the recording being circulated. And I mentioned that the recording is going to go up on the website as a kind of ongoing resource, but it's also will be circulated to all of the everyone who registered for today, as soon as it's available, probably at the beginning of next week. So you all who are joining today, or maybe had colleagues who registered but weren't able to join, will have fairly immediate access to this recording. And so we appreciate that. There's also going to be a webinar on May the 2nd that will be jointly hosted by AMS and the Colorado Food Systems Institute, focused on FAME and using it for state, regional and state food systems mapping projects, so it's a little bit of a different kind of approach to using FAME, but please join us or mark that on your calendar, and information will be sent out in the next few weeks about that one. So we'll have some ongoing webinars and discussions about the tool starting with this. So we really appreciate all of your time, and if you have any additional questions, stick them in and we'll answer them in the few minutes that we have left.
Awesome, great suggestion about Illinois. And I think also, as we kind of build our team here at Colorado State University, there's possibility of, if there is value about kind of going through and trying to pull those sources from other places. Again, it's just the consistency of the data and trying to figure out what would be comparable between Illinois, New York, Texas, those kind of things. Thank you, everyone. That was a really interesting question and answer, and really appreciated the comments and suggestions.
Yeah, and we'll compile all these suggestions and bring them to the grad student competition that we're hosting. So really, really useful and appreciative of your knowledge. Hope everyone has an excellent day.